Okay. So in part 3, the examiner would ask some questions related to part 2. So for instance, the question in part 2 is talking about possession. So the question in part 3 is related about acquiring something. So for example, in your view, the do you think that people is more acquisitive or less acquisitive? Okay. Why? And then another question. Um, do you think that or describe the importance or the value of possessions that your parents' time and the values that you have this time? So that means it's asking about it's asking you to show comparison what your parents had before and compare to what you have now. Okay, so that's what it means. So you have to listen carefully to the questions because sometimes the structure is quite different. So it's like in an advanced structure. So if you don't really get what the question or what is the examiner trying to ask you, you can ask the examiner to repeat the question for you by saying, I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question? Do not say, sorry, pardon, come again. Don't say that. So you have to ask politely from the examiner to repeat the question for you, and they're willing to do that, but only once. Okay, let's say you ask the examiner to repeat the question for you, but then on the second time around you still don't get it, so do not ask another repetitions because you will maybe get confused and they will don't like it. Okay, there are some examiner nga dali ra pud sila masuko. So the question in this part are of a more abstract nature and so are more difficult than the question in part 1 and 2. So it's a two-way discussion, but you will still be expected to do most of the speaking. In other words, uh, even if it is two-way discussion, the job of the examiner or the only role of the examiner is to ask questions. So for example, you would say, let's say the question it says, compare the value of the possessions that you have now as the possessions that your parents had. Okay, so as I can see it, as far or you would say as far as I remember when I was a child, my parents only have uh, at home, mostly in at home. During that time when I was a kid or when I was a child, my parents just only have things that they really really need, or let's say appliances like rice cooker or washing machine, television set. So but now during my time we are now in advanced technology, so it's not only the appliances that we have, but we also have some extra gadgets such as cell phones, some other electronic device that we can possibly use for our day-to-day basis. So as I can see it, there is a much difference. Okay, so moving on tayo ng, so what are you trying to say? How difference is that? So mo ask, that's how the examiner would ask you or ask for a clarification. So you have to show also after showing comparison, you have to support your answer by showing examples in part 3. Don't forget, give an example to make it clear or much clearer to your listener or to the example what you're trying to say, and then make a summary, okay, at the end of your response, so it would be clearer for your examiner what you're trying to say. All right, so we have here some sample questions in part 3. Is buying clothes a popular activity for teenage in your country? So this is like a questions about everything or talk about related to your society or to the people or based on your observation around you. So when you give answer in this part 3 or in this part, please do not say you, do not use I. So this is talks about teenagers in your country. So specifically all the teenagers in the Philippines. So, uh, in buying clothes, is buying clothes a popular activity for teenagers in your country? So you're going to respond this way. As what I have observed, most of the teenagers here are not really fond of buying clothes. So I can say it's not really an active popular activity, but as what I have observed also, or what I have noticed on the social media, most of the teenagers are into TikTok. TikTok is one of the social media that most of the young people are like showing dance or acting. So I can say here in the Philippines, it's not really a popular activity for teenagers. All right. So you have to make conclusion or concluding, make a concluding statement after you give your answer. Okay. So you like by saying, in other words, okay, or I can say, so it's like that. Now, how much money should parents spend on their children's clothes? I believe buying clothes for children, it's should have a limit, because children would grow very fast and therefore they would change the sizes, and um uh so when they grow, most likely they will not be using the clothes. So it's very pragmatic that mm, maybe the parents would just buy clothes like 4 times in a year, because a child would grow. So every year, most likely, the size of the clothes would vary. So, yeah. Okay. So, what types of fashion do teenagers like to wear in your country? Where here in the Philippines, most of the teenagers this time, they just wear a t-shirt, loose t-shirt, and high jeans, high waist jeans. So, which is this? I think this is the trend for most of the teenagers here in the Philippines. Next, what influence has the fashion industry had in your country? Well, since most of the teenagers or people have access to internet, I believe that fashion has a great impact to majority of the people. So like for example, they see someone posting on the Instagram or on Pinterest, so they would copy what's on trend or what's in this time. Okay, so I can say it has an influence. Well, don't worry if, because whatever your answer here in this part, it's your opinion, is this is what you have observed, so there is no wrong or right answer. Okay, so as long as you can respond to the question. Okay, are fashions of today different from those when your parents were young? As I have seen the history of fashion, I could say that it's just repetitive. What I'm trying to say, for example, nowadays, most of the people wearing, or let's say the teenagers wearing loose t-shirt and high waist jeans. This is also what I have observed in 1980s or somewhere in 1970s. I'm not really sure of the timeline, but I can say that it's us has also almost same. Although there's a little bit of change, but I can say it's the same. The fashion is the same. Although it changed from time to time, but it's just recycled. Okay. So, what do you think will be the effect of the fashion industry in the next 10 years? Okay, what do you think? So, magloading pa ka. Gunahuna ka sa imuhang answer. You can ask the examiner to repeat the question for you. Okay, I'm sorry. Can you please repeat the question? What do you think will be the effects of the fashion industry in the next 10 years? Okay, so if you want to give yourself a time, you can say, well, as I can see it, let me think. I'm not really sure of this, but as what I see right now, people are more on fashion, and so I can say that in the next 10 years, fashion industry will be a uh, um, bigger trend, or has becoming more popular in the next 10 years. So that's how you answer. It's up to you. Okay. Next, we have here the 4 criteria in speaking. We have the fluency and coherence. The examiner would check how fluent you speak and how well you link your ideas together. And coherence is that how you give your answer, is your answer appropriate to the questions? Okay? Kung mag-off topic ka nga ni, you will be penalized in this criterion. Pronunciation. You have to pronounce the word and stress the word properly. Don't talk too fast, because if you talk too fast, most likely you will stutter or you will mispronounce the word. And if you speak too slow, so that's another one thing that can affect your fluency as well. Okay, lexical resource is that how you vary the words that you're using. So you have to, instead of saying it is more practical, and then so I can say it's really pragmatic. So those two words are the same, but you are this time you're showing the examiner that you have a variety of words. Okay, so you can use variety of words in your response, so that would fall under your lexical resource. Practical and pragmatic, same meaning. Okay, grammatical range and accuracy, how accurate and varied your grammar structure. So be careful with this and listen carefully to the question. What is the structure of the question? If it is in a past form, you have to answer with a past form. If it is in a present form, you have to answer or give your answer in a present form. For example, what is your favorite subject? What is, that is present. What is your favorite subject? So even if in the back of your mind, I'm not studying now, so maybe the examiner is asking me when I was still a student, what was my favorite subject? So then you are assuming, you are now would give answer like this. uh my favorite subject was, so that is wrong because the question is in a present form. So you have to answer it in a present form by saying, my favorite subject is English because it's very useful for me. I need to learn the structure, the proper structure, since I'm planning to go to work in an English country. So it's very important for me to learn such language. So now I'm start loving it. Okay. Now, uh, another clue, if the question is about things that you like or things that you don't like, or the things that you prefer to do or usually do or love to do usually, then you answer in a present tense. For example, what do you usually do on your free time? Well, on my day off, since I'm working right now in the hospital, so I only have one day off in a week. And so most of the time, when I have a day off, I just spend it on sleeping the whole day because I always get assigned in a graveyard shift. So my sleeping pattern has been changed, and then so if I have an off, so this is the only time that my body can get recovered. So I prefer to sleep and stay at home. Okay, or I prefer to stay at home and sleep all day. So that's what I usually do on my free time. All right, or if I have free time, I go out with my husband. We go to the mall, we eat out. Okay, like that. Next. Mm, okay, so fluency is a combination of speed of speech, length of answer, and pausing correctly. Coherence is the ability to expand your answers, answer the questions directly, and add relevant details to explain or illustrate your answers. Connect your sentences by using tenses and connectors. So when we say connectors like firstly, secondly, thirdly, or for starters, and the next and the last, or consequently as a result. So those are what we call connectors. Now, common mistake. You should note that very fast or very long answers are not necessarily good, as you may be penalized for poor pronunciation or lack of coherence. In the speaking, the main point is that you are able to express yourself clearly. Another common mistake is to not answer the question. This is where you will be penalized, of course. So listen carefully to the question. What is the focus, or what is the keywords? Okay, what are you being asked? For example, is asking about compare the passion, or is there any difference with the fashion of your parents time and your time? Okay, pronunciation, the main point here is that your pronunciation is easy to understand, and whether you are able to make your meaning clear. Features of good pronunciation include basic word pronunciation, linked speech sounds, correct sentence stress. Okay, for example, you have to stress the word if you are emphasizing past, okay, or referring past in the past, things in the past. So, for example, the question is, where did you first learn English? So, the examiner would ask you, where did you first learn English? Okay, the keyword is did. So, you would say, I first learned, if you would say, I first learned, wrong. You have to stress the word that would emphasize or talking about past. So the past form of learn is learned. So you have to stress the word. Correct use of intonation, the rising and falling also. So when to use rising and when to use falling. So when you are asking questions, you can raise your voice. So do you think that there will be more world leaders meeting? So that's the intonation. You see the difference? Rather than I believe that, as I have observed, I believe that there will be more world leaders meeting because as we have experienced now, or let's say in the globe, the world has a lot of issues to tackle. So therefore I can say there would be more world leaders meeting. So the leaders would talk about how to address climate change, global warming, the pandemic now that we are experiencing, and the issue of the nuclear weapon. So I can say there will be always or more world leaders meeting in the future. All right. So you see the intonation that I'm using. So you should note that there is no need to have a British or American accent as long as you can deliver your answer in a clear manner. Okay. Lexical resource. This is the vocabulary. So the key concept here is clarity. Do you have enough words to express yourself clearly? This is judged by your ability to have enough vocabulary to discuss range of topics, to use vocabulary accurately, be able to explain yourself when you do not have the right word, and that is what we call circumlocution. So if you cannot really remember the right word, then try to describe a particular thing in a simple words, as as long as your listener can imagine what you're trying to say. So, here in the lexical resource, common mistake is to use long words without really knowing that what they mean. So, avoid using big words or advanced vocabulary if you're not really sure of how it is be used, or what's the usage or how to use it. So, after all, fluency is the most important, and if you are understood by your listener. Okay, grammatical range and accuracy. There are two key points to understand here. First, you need to avoid grammar mistake, especially with your tenses. So, for example, people believe, or if you say people believes, that's wrong grammar. People is plural, so your verb should be know s. If your subject is singular, your verb should have s. So for example, nowadays women think that, or women act. So women is plural. So the verb has no s. Okay. Let's say talk about student. A student should have, or student is always, or student provides, student studies. So student is singular, so our verb is in a singular form, or let's say it has an s. So student studies. Okay, student explains, student talks. Okay, so you need to use range of grammatical structure, and you should not just use simple sentences all the time. Okay. Okay. Now, these are the things that you have to remember. Focus on what's important when you prepare. Unless you have particularly bad pronunciation, so don't spend a lot of time and money on pronunciation lesson only. Okay? You are better to spend this time increasing your range of vocabulary and sentence structure and practicing speaking as much as you can to increase your fluency. All right? Avoid nerves. This can be difficult because you are taking a test, but try not to be nervous. The more calm you are, the more you can think clearly, and your speaking would go smoothly. Trust me, I've been there. I've already took the test twice. Okay, first when in 2011, I took the paper based during that time, and then second was in 2017 computer based. So I took twice. So I know what to do. I know what to expect. So every time I do my speaking test, I just stay calm. Even if I don't have much time to practice, but I always keep myself calm so I can think properly. And I surrender everything to God. Lord, I prepared for this test, so I leave this all to you. The decision is yours if I am for this. So you always ask guidance and approval from our Father. Okay. After all, He will be the one to decide for our future. Okay. Now, if you can't speak much because you are nervous, then you may get a lower score as the examiner needs to hear you speak as much as possible in order to assess your skills. Ayaw padala sa imong kulba. Ayaw paunahan na imong kulba. Let it be. Just enjoy. Okay? Anyway, di man ka mamatay o di ka maka-answer. So, the more you think negative, the more you get nervous. The more you think what would be the possible outcome, the more you become panic. So, just let it be. Enjoy it and focus. Listen carefully to the examiner's question, and then everything would be easy. Okay. If you speak freely and confidently, then you may get a score you did not expect. So, kung confident ra ka, relax ra ka, imbis nga, di pa mo ko ready, ani, oy, sus, 6 ra siguro ni, bahala na lang. Then, on the actual test, you're just relaxed. Most likely, you can get 7 and above. So, usually I get 7 to 7.5 mm, on my both tests actually. So, yun. Um, extend your answers, all right? Extend your answers as much as possible. In other words, you have to explain, most especially in part 3. Most especially in part 3. I will emphasize this because part 1 only requires a brief answer. Part 2, of course, you have to answer in a long structure, of course. In part 3, you have to explain why. Don't wait for the examiner to ask you questions. Why, or ayaw paghulat nga, lubagon pagag maayo sa examiner. So, the more you give short answer in part 3, the more the examiner would ask questions. So, expand. Extend your answers. Of all the IELTS speaking tips, this is probably one of the most important. The examiner job is to assess your speaking. So if you say very little, he or she will not be able to do this. So don't give one word answers such as yes or no only, and that's it. Your job is to give the examiner as much language as possible to assess. So speak as much as you can. Okay, for example, question in part 1. Do you love shopping? Yes. Diha ra ka kutob. Unsa may i-assess sa imong sa imong examiner. So you have to elaborate it. You would say, yes, actually, every time I have time, I go to the shopping mall and buy something like maybe I will buy one dress or one shoes or bags, or I have to buy something, or I go to grocery store to buy some toiletries or some snacks. So I can say I love shopping so much. Not so much. Okay. I just love shopping because I it makes me relax, and it makes me to get out of my comfort as well. So I go, or like, even not just even just at home, I go online shopping because it makes me feel good that I have something new. Okay. So that's it. Stay on topic. It's important to extend your answer as mentioned above, but make sure you stay on topic. Don't talk about anything that comes into your mind if it is not answering the question. Okay, if it's not related, ayun nag-i-appeal. Okay, don't rely on the examiner. The examiner usually won't prompt you to say more if you don't say enough. So it's up to you to give a full answer to each question. If you don't, then the examiner will be over very quickly and you may not be happy with your score. So, bantayin yun. So, show the examiner that you can communicate. Okay? Remember, sorry. Remember, this is your key or you prove the TRF that you can get after taking this IELTS test is your proof the level or show the level of your proficiency in English. Show what you've got. Kaya ipakita po na nimo sa imong examiner, and also when you apply for the visa, diha po na mag-base. Okay? So understand the question. If you do not understand question, then ask the examiner to repeat it. Don't try to answer it the first time if you have not understood or heard it properly. Because if you're too shy to ask, most likely you will be giving wrong answer because you did not understand what it means. Or uh most likely you would give the wrong answer. Yeah. Okay, so if you won't lose mark for asking, don't worry if you ask the examiner to repeat the question for you. You won't lose mark for asking for a question to be repeated. However, if you're unable to answer a lot of the questions, you are probably not ready to take the test. So kung sige na lang po kag pa-repeat sa question, oh, there's something wrong. Meaning you're not prepared for the test and you did not prepare enough. Don't show off. You want to do your best to impress the examiner, but try to keep within your capabilities. If you try to use lots of grammar, structures, and vocabulary that are not confident about, you may simply bring down your score. And make eye contact, especially in part one and part three. Part two, it's okay not to keep an eye contact with the examiner because you were taking a glance into your notes. Of course, that's okay. And then, by the way, during the entire test, do not get distracted by the examiner when the examiner is taking down notes because they are just taking down on the assessment. They are grading you at the same time. So don't get distracted. Stay focused and keep talking. Don't stop when the examiner stop because this is recorded. So if you pause, so there will be a pause in between the recording, and so the examiner would think that your fluency is not that good enough. Okay, so just continue talking. Try to have eye contact with the examiner. This does not mean you need to look at him or her all the time, but it is normal when you have a conversation with someone to spend quite a lot of time looking at them as that keeps their attention. So if you are speaking with someone and they never look at you would feel strange, diba? Or you feel like, kawa ba po'y batasan ani niya, oy kawa ba po'y etiquette ani niya, di man ni siya magtanaw, magstorya ko, magsige man ni siya duko siyang cellphone. That's same feeling, you know what I mean? Same feeling like that. Now, listen carefully. So listen very carefully to the questions so you are answering them correctly. For example, if you are asked about an event in the past, so make sure you answer using the past tense, of course. So be careful of the verbs that you're going to use and stress and emphasize the word form or the past form of that particular verb. Be on time. Okay. Normally, if you're going to take with British Council or IDP, they would email you a week before your writing test. And in that email, it contains your speaking schedule. So let's say your speaking schedule is at 10 a.m. So you should be at the test venue around 9 a.m., 1 hour before, or let's say 30 minutes, so that you won't be rushing. And so on the actual test, di ka maghangos-hangos, you will not be panting. S- So be on time or have a little bit of time before your schedule so you can relax and get used to the environment and mag-adjust pa imong body, and then you can settle, and then once you relax, so you won't get panic when the speaking start or the speaking test start. So these IELTS speaking tips will not be much use to you if you are not on time. Because if you are also late, they will not let you take the test. You're going to get off to a bad start if you have upset the examiner because you have kept them waiting. So arrive in plenty of time. So make the most of your speaking test. Try to talk as much as you can, talk as fluently as possible, and be spontaneous, relax, be confident, and enjoy using your English. Develop your answers, speak more than the examiner because you're the one taking the test, it's not the examiner. Ask for clarification if necessary, if you don't really understand the question. So you ask the examiner to repeat it. Do not learn prepared answers because examiners is trained to spot this and will change the question. Okay, so, and it's very obvious if you have memorized because the way you speak, the fluency is affected. And then express your opinions, you will be assessed on your ability to communicate. So don't forget and don't worry, most especially in part three, that there is no wrong or right answer because that's your opinion. Okay, be it as long as you can express or communicate. Okay? The examiner's question tend to be fairly predictable. Practice at home and record yourself. Okay. As you can see on the book, we have there some sample questions. And those are the common questions nga i-ask. Ibalik-balik na nila. So prepare for that, those questions. Prepare for an answer for those questions. Okay, so that's it. This is the end of our speaking lecture. So all the great speakers were bad speakers at first. So don't worry. When you're practicing, do not expect perfectness. Okay, or perfection. Perfection. All right. So that's all.
Thank you.
Do you have question?
Wala ra man.
Klaro ra pagka-explain?
Yes, ma'am.